to Maxed Out Man, helping you become the man you were made to be.
Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from the Maxed Out Man podcast. This is episode number 45. I am here with Justin Roethlingshoefer.
You got it. Nailed it.
So I've worked on that. I actually remembered how to spell it when I put it into my little show notes this morning. So I was impressed. That's a name that is difficult to pronounce and remember and to write, but not difficult to remember. So that's good. Let me give a little bit of quick background. Justin's an author, speaker, TEDx speaker, founder of Own It, which is a health coaching company that aims to reclaim the health of the world by empowering high performers to take ownership of their health so that they can thrive in all areas of life. So there's your LinkedIn website about us, kind of intro. But I had the conversation yesterday with somebody and I said, I don't necessarily I'm not a people person, but I'm a my people person. And I was super excited when I read, when I saw that you were going to be on and saw what you do. And so I'm very excited about this episode. So I appreciate you coming on board. Your podcast has a few more episodes than I do, somewhere in the 240s. So you're an old pro at this, but hey, give me your, I always like to ask for the background and kind of your story. We've got a little bit of time here, obviously, to kind of where you got, how you got here, where you are, and where you want to go.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love the question, Kevin, and I appreciate being on here and just your tenacity and consistency with the show, because I remember when I started my show, it was for the first. You're further ahead of me than you're further ahead than I was at that point. I think it was episode 74. And I remember this number because it just sticks out so vividly. And it was episode 74. I had looked back. I had somewhere between 15 and 25 listens for each one of those episodes up until that point. And I'm sure my mom had to be 10 of those. She re-listened to them every time. That's all she listened to. And I was like, man, should I just continue or should I just toss in the bag this? What are we doing here? At what point are we going to see any growth? And I think yesterday we just filmed episode 256 or something like that. And we're up to about 15 to 17,000 average.
That's awesome.
Download now. So I say that to give you absolute hope in where you're going, and consistency will continue to just make the outcome inevitable. And we're going to talk a lot about this today. And that's a great segue into kind of my journey, because at 12 years old, I was born and raised in Edmonton up in Northwest Canada, and hockey was a religion. It's literally what you did. And so I was 12 years old. I was playing with 14, 15-year-olds. It was really kind of during that breakout time, that separation time in youth sports where you've kind of you've played your minor hockey all through, and now you're starting to be able to jump levels and play with kids that are older than you. And that was really where I was finding myself. And I'd gone through a couple week spell of just not playing really well, trying to keep up in some ways with some of the older kids and the higher talent levels. And my dad came up to me and he put his arm around me and he said, "Son, talent will get you noticed, but consistency will get you paid." And when he said that, it hit me, and it just triggered something inside to go, man, what do I need to do to be the most consistent version of myself? What can I take control of? And that was the moment that I got obsessed with health, wellness, and performance. I knew that I could control what I ate. I knew I could control how I worked out, how I trained, how I prepared, how I slept, how I recovered. All of these things I knew were within my control, and that's where I turned my attention. And so as a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, I'm measuring how I'm sleeping. I'm measuring sleep quality. I'm measuring heart rate variability. I'm training with a heart rate monitor. I'm looking at my blood work. I'm asking my doctors for every piece of information I can so that I can understand this thing I'm living in and start to put a plan by design in place, no longer just grabbing what everybody else is doing, but being different and taking ownership of that. And so that drove my just obsession and interest in that field. And it brought me down to the United States on a hockey scholarship when I was 18, 19 years old. And I stayed down here, got 2 bachelor's degrees, had a cup of coffee as a pro, went and got my master's degree, and then worked on my postgraduate doctoral work in heart rate variability, sleep, and recovery science before stepping into the NCAA as a performance director. Was at Louisville, working under Tina Murray, and had just an absolute blessing of an opportunity to take a lot of this different thinking and apply it in a unique way before getting my first crack at the NHL. And when I went into the league, what I noticed was that everybody was doing everything the same. Everybody was eating the same. Everybody was training the same. Everybody was supplementing the same. Everybody was recovering the same. There was no differentiation. There was no personalization. But yet management and ownership was wondering why they were getting the same results as everybody else. Why were we unable to be less injured? Why were we unable to maximize energy and performance long-term throughout an 82-game season? Like, why are we falling into the same patterns? Well, it's because we're doing the same thing as everybody else. We have to be different. And so that's when we brought a lot of these systems and strategies into play that I had been working on myself since 13 years old. And then having now education and a deeper level of understanding behind the whole thing. And lo and behold, injury rates went down, sickness rates went down, energy levels went up, performance levels went up. And all of a sudden we started to transform the way that the industry was operating. Well, fast forward now to 2019, and been in the league for 9 years and really doing this in a big way. And I had forgotten to do it for myself. And I started to get brain fog. I started to get headaches. I started to get these stomach pains that I couldn't figure out. But on the outside, I look great. Like, all the muscles, all the 6-pack abs, everything that people would like say, hey, no, you're healthy. And I went to all the docs. I went to all the functional medicine clinics. I went to all the specialists. They all said, hey, your blood work looks great. I don't know, like that's what your job's entailing. And I was like, I know my body too well. Something's not right. Like, I don't feel well. And went to a specialist up in New York City, and he did a procedure that ultimately found 7 polyps the size of my thumb, all precancerous in my colon. Wow. And an ulcer the size of a quarter, also precancerous in my stomach. And he said, if we hadn't found it when we did, the likelihood of me seeing my 35th birthday was slim to none. And that was a big wake-up call for me, and realized that what I was doing and the problems we were solving in the NHL were not athlete problems, but human problems, and created a deep passion and calling within me to make the same strategies, philosophies, and systems available to everybody that at that point was only available to the elite.
And that's where Own It comes in. Now, first of all, I want to ask, I don't know anything about hockey, which is ironic because I live in Montana where we have 11 months of winter, but I don't know anything about hockey. So in the NHL and in that environment, like, you look at the different sports, right? Like the running back, defensive ends, all of those guys in football tend to be the most in shape and seem to work the hardest. And you've got 400-pound linemen that, are probably in shape, but they carry a ton of body fat. Sure. You've got soccer players who typically have, or football, that kind of football, European football. They have the highest degree of cardio fitness because they're running and doing HIIT cardio for 90 minutes or 2 hours or however long a match lasts. Yeah. And then Major League Baseball players, I don't know. They're kind of all over the map, but where does hockey fall in that range in terms of like overall fitness and what they do and, all that?
Yeah. So hockey is a very unique sport because you have to have a high degree of strength, a high degree of fitness, a high degree, and let's break fitness down, aerobic and anaerobic fitness, because you're out there for 45, 50 seconds and you're doing those bursts anywhere between 25 and 35 times a game. And so you're having to really make sure that you're almost like that hybrid athlete, if you will. A lot of people are talking about hybrid athletes today that, like the CrossFit athletes or the Hyrox Games athletes or the Spartan races, all of these things are like the hybrid athlete. That's really what hockey was. It's this unique intersection point of strength, power, and then aerobic and anaerobic fitness. And so I think that's why for so long you saw hockey being so far behind the all these other sports in terms of personalization and specificity, because everybody is so similar in terms of needs. Now, can you break it down? And goaltenders need much different strength and fitness and flexibility than your defensemen, than your forwards. Yes. And that's what we started to bring. And that's what we started to look at, was the uniqueness of each one of these. While if you're comparing sports and athletes, they're very different than these other sports and athletes in which you're preparing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, and it's got to be, you end up with very unique training, because we talk about slow twitch muscle fibers, fast twitch muscle fibers, and having, people tend to lean more towards one or the other. But what you're describing is a situation where you need a decent balance, or need to be able to train that balance between the two, right?
And that's, I think, where so mmany people, especially in the hockey world when we were starting, just got lost in the sense that you could just do literally anything. You could run a few miles a day and then do some bodybuilding strength work, and you were pretty fit, and you could play hockey. And because you had that level of strength, you had the ability to skate, you could transfer that strength into power, you had the ability to do it for longer periods of time. But because of the uniqueness of the sport, you started to see injuries that started to constantly come up, and you didn't have the level of individualization and focus on what it was that was required to make sure that they could actually have the capacity and resiliency to withstand an 82-game season.
Yeah, that's, what a cool opportunity for you to kind of, bring something into an industry that wasn't necessarily already there. And I'm assuming the exercise science part of that. My degree's in exercise physiology. I have another degree in business, but so like I go way back to personal training, running health clubs, all that. But the science is just, I did American College of Sports Medicine certifications and all that, but the science has changed so much. Like I just go down and lift because I'm vain and I want to be healthy, right? So I'm not studying it at the level that you did. So when you're 14, 15 years old, this is pre-wearable days. So like, are you carrying around a little workbook with and a polar heart rate monitor? Is that?
Oh, this is a great story. So 14-year-old Justin, well, actually, let's even back up. 13-year-old Justin slept with a pulse oximeter, and I would take.
Where did you get it?
So I went to my parents and I said, "Hey guys, for Christmas this year, I want a pulse oximeter." And remember, like this is a 14-year-old kid, and my parents were like, "What? Are you sick? Like what's wrong?" And I was like, "No, I just want to know some information." And this is when you can't actively like grab these things for like $5, $6 or a wearable for 30, 40, $50. And so at 13, I asked for a pulse oximeter. It's like $400. And they were like, well, we're not getting you one of these because it's going to sit on the shelf. It's ridiculous. And I was like, no, I want this. This can be my birthday present. My Christmas present can be everything for the year. So that's what I got, and wrote down every morning my, blood ox score as well as my resting heart rate. And that was just something I tracked over the course of time and started to make conclusions, started to be able to talk through it. And I was like, you know what? I need an actual heart rate tracker because I want to be able to look. I found the metric heart rate variability, understanding how your body was adapting to stress and strain over the course of time, and being able to then create a single number that I could actually start to extrapolate out from every single beat of my heart throughout the night, so I could see how my body was recovering from what I had done before. And I was like, well, now I'm going to have to be able to find a way to track this. So I need a heart rate monitor. Well, Polar had their H10s. They had just come out, and these things were like $900. And I went to my parents for same thing. They saw how I was tracking everything. I said, hey, I need one of these. And they're like, no, we're not doing this. And I was like, take yours, take grandma's, take grandpa's, take my aunt's, take my uncle's, all birthday presents, all Christmas. You guys this is all I want, all I need. Well, lo and behold, away we went. And so I started sleeping with this thing. I started training with this thing. I started walking around with this thing. And Then I did the same thing with sleep. And so it just became this deeper understanding of what was happening within my body and what was actually going on. Actually, to the same point, at 17, I actually told the doctors that I was diabetic. And they're like, "You're not a diabetic." I was like, "No, I'm a diabetic. I need to measure my blood sugar." So like how today you get like, this kid's like 20 years ahead of his life or ahead of his time, right? Where we're doing all this stuff now. But I was like, no, I got to measure blood sugars to see like what I'm eating and like spikes and valleys and like how I can optimize certain things. And they're like, we're not doing that, son. So I didn't get the blood glucose monitor, but that's really how I started. And it was, I don't know for sure, like in terms of numbers, but maybe missed 10 days over the course of like 5-6 years. And it was every single day. And even when I went to college, like we didn't have these polar systems or catapult or any of these other management systems that we have now. And so I had a watch, and a lot of like the runners, right? And it started to become a thing in the triathlete world and the marathon world where you'd have a heart rate monitor and a watch that gathered all the data. And so what I would do is I would wear my heart rate monitor under my equipment, and then I'd take my watch because I didn't want it on my wrist. I'd put it in my pants for when I was playing games. And I'll never forget, I went behind the net and I got hit, and I went up against the boards, and all of a sudden, as I'm skating, all of these black shards started to be on the ice. And so the watch got absolutely crushed, and they had to blow the game down, and they're gathering up this stuff. I'm like, what is this? And basically the watch got crushed in my pants and had to go get another one and all this stuff. But I had all the game data. And so after every game, I'd go and look at it. I'd see what my recovery rates were. I'd see what my peaks, my averages were, what I was getting down to on the bench in between shifts and in between flurries of action, and ultimately built my training around that, build my nutrition around that, build my recovery around that. And that was, at the end of the day, I say that's the only reason that I was able to succeed. That's the only reason I was able to differentiate myself. I wasn't the best player. I wasn't the biggest. I wasn't the fastest. We went back to what my dad said is, when you're consistent, that's the moment you get paid, or that's the moment you get paid. And talent gets you noticed, consistent gets you paid. And that's kind of where it came around to. And I ended up coming up with this definition for performance, because I think so often we think, how can I perform better? And we put performance up on a pedestal. We determine performance as like an outcome. It's winning, it's success, it's whatever. But actually, performance is your process. Performance is your system. And so performance, I define as the capacity and desire to intentionally and consistently behave at a level equal to your mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional potential. And so when we look at this, you've got two things. You've got capacity and you've got desire. Well, everybody wants to have the business. Everybody wants to have the platform. Everybody wants to be the influencer. Everybody wants to win and succeed. Everybody has that desire. The desire exists there. That's not the issue. It's the capacity that's the issue. We either don't have the patience, we don't have the stamina, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the intelligence, we don't have the energy. And that's what ultimately prevents us from being consistent and intentional. Because if we're consistent and intentional and know exactly where we want to go, and we have the capacity to withstand the length of time necessary for us to get to the desired outcome, the outcome is inevitable. We've already won. We're already going to be there. We know we're going to win. It's just, how long is it going to take? And do we have the capacity to withstand to live up to the potential that's ultimately inside? And that was a big aha moment for me as I kind of came through this. And like a lot of what I talk to is, how do we build this structure? How do we build this system to make sure that we're living a life by design so that we can get to where we're wanting to go? And we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. And oftentimes we're living based upon a system that's not only antiquated, but ultimately not designed for where we're trying to go. But yet we get frustrated as to figure out why we can't get there.
And I mean, is there something innate with people that are high performers that, that have I mean, I'll use myself an example. There's no humble brag involved in any of this. So I have major failings, but my family has said many times they're convinced that I'm actually a robot. I just have a very high functioning way, but everything is systematized. I get up almost exactly the same time every day. I work out every day. I eat pretty much I have a pretty simple diet. Like food to me, I was telling somebody yesterday, back in the day, they had the Jetsons, where you could have a little pill that tasted like whatever. And that was your meal. Like I'd be all about that because food, I enjoy going out and all that stuff, but I'm wondering if and my kids always tell each other, don't try to compare where you are and what you're doing with dad, because everybody has a different process and you can't compare yourself to that. And I'm not like ultra successful or professional athlete or any of those things, but I'm wondering if what you're finding is there an innate personality trait, physicality, physiological, something that kind of you start from this point and then it's easier to get there? Or I'm just curious how that all works on what you see.
Yeah. So the uniqueness that I've started to tap into is a lot of people who are succeeding at these levels are type A. They've got a lot of obsessions. They love patterns. They love systems. They love understanding things. They love knowing what to do and following routines and habits so that their behaviors, they no longer have to think about. And what I've noticed as a big drop off, or a big, I guess, error that is made, is people start to mimic other people's systems. And when you start to mimic other people's systems, that's a recipe for failure. Why? Because the system was developed for Kevin. The system was developed for Justin. The system was developed for Sarah. It wasn't developed for you. And you see this with a lot of people's morning routines where they're like, oh, well, Jeff Bezos does this, or Oprah does this, or Jennifer Aniston does this, or whatever it is. And they've got these lists of 10, 12, 13, 14 things to do. And all it does is paralyze you. It creates overwhelm. It creates wasted time that it's not set up for where you're wanting to go. And that's where, if we come back to clarity on where do you want to go, what do you want your outcome to be, the outcome's inevitable. And quite frankly, the outcome doesn't matter, because you're going to get there eventually if you are consistent and intentional in the behaviors in which you're going for. You want to build a $10 million business. People are they might hear this and push back. Building a $10 million business is not that difficult. You need a good idea and you need the system and strategy to get there. And then you're going to act intentionally and consistently over a certain period of time. And lo and behold, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later, you got a $10 million business. Mm-hmm. It's just, have you been patient enough and consistent enough over that time to see the outcome through? You want to lose 50 pounds? It's not that difficult. You want to put on 10 pounds? It's not that difficult. You want to sleep better? It's not that difficult. Like it's really not. People say, hey, I'm genetically predisposed to this. It's a lie.
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, you're just you're genetically predisposed to a sleeve of Oreos. That's
exactly. Yeah, show me the obesity gene. It doesn't exist. Show me the skinny gene. It doesn't exist. It's all dependent on how your habits and behaviors are aligned with what you actually need and what you're required. And so we can start to get into like all the different testing and all the different information and all the different data that you can get so that you can now have your blueprint and guide you through. And how do we now take that in a very purposeful and actionable way? But we have to develop the system. We have to develop the strategy that is constantly and ever changing and iterating, which is why we can't have, again, not everybody's an expert in the health, wellness, and performance space, but yet we all try to kind of put it together ourselves. But yet, if I said to you, hey, you're not an expert in business, but you're trying to build a $10 million business, do you ever think that's going to happen? Probably not, because you don't have the system. And you're going to get frustrated, which is why people go this way, which is why they seek somebody to either help guide them or a partner or somebody to help lean in. But we don't do that for our health. We don't do that for our bodies. And our bodies are the only things that ultimately are going to get us to where we want to go. I always ask this on any stages that I'm on. So I'll ask you, Kevin, what are the most important things in the world to you?
God, family, health.
It's so funny. I've asked this to probably 15,000 people by now, and there's either 3 or 4 things, depending how you categorize them. You said family, health, and God. I get God or faith, health, family, and sometimes they split family into spouse and kids.
Yeah.
So it's the
well,
same
and I probably would too. Yeah. I actually put my wife first. So
exactly. So if I was to say, hey, Kevin, I'm taking your health away from you, or I'm taking your faith away from you, or I'm taking your family away from you, what would you give to get it back?
Anything. I mean, that's you take, and like I would, and obviously there's a continuum, right? Like my faith is most important because that's eternal.
Sure.
Then you have your family and then you have health. And so it's like, which one do you want to give up? Well, dude, you don't have to, right? You don't have to give that
any
up.
Of them. But if I was to say, hey, Kevin, I'm taking your family from you, what would you give to give it back? I get 2 answers all the time, anything and everything.
Yep.
And so if you already have everything that you need, why would you not manage them better? You manage your family a certain way, you manage your faith a certain way, you manage your business a certain way, but yet you forget to manage your health a certain way. And when you forget to manage your health, it goes back to what I think it was Gandhi who said, you strive so long to build the business that you want or to build the life you want and trade your health for that, ultimately to trade all the money that you've made to get your health back.
Right.
Well, what if we were able to do it together? What if we were able to run your body like you do your business, run your body with the intentionality with you run your business, and ultimately make sure that you had a system that was simple, easy to follow, that was different than Kevin's, was different than Justin's, was different than Sarah's, and was just focused on you, that empowered you so you no longer had to think about decisions you were making, but rather it was just innate and instinctual habits that you knew because you had information that basically told you what the truth was.
Yeah. It's for me, it's like the question is not, are you going to work out today? The question is, what time are you going to work out today? And what are you going to do? What body part is today? And so it just becomes, that's my thing, right? Like that's in terms of taking care of my health. What are you going to eat today? Are you going to, is today a reward day, reward meal, what you can call a cheat meal, which there's different data about that. But do you think that it's in terms of the way people see this whole fitness thing, do you think it's this lottery mentality? And I say lottery mentality of like, get rich quick, do very, very little, lose 50 pounds in 3 days and the Nutrisystem and all these things. Like you said, it's not that easy, but it's why have we overcomplicated? Is that just like, it's the Tony Littles of the world and all these different, it's like this, it's Susan, you're younger than me, but the Susan Powders, that whole thing where we said, it's the fat that's making you fat and all of that, all of that BS. But
so I was trying to write down some notes because as you said this next question, I had like 19 things come into my mind. I was like, I don't want to miss any of them. So there's a multitude of things here. Number one is, and nobody's to blame. The system's to blame. Remember, everything's a system. And a lot of us are hardwired with systems that predispose us to failure. And we're acting in accordance to certain systems that are just a road to failure. And we operate, quite frankly, in a society that has us on a road to that same destination. And so when you think about the health and wellness world, we as humans want to shy away as far as we can from hard work, time, and patience. And the people that I work with, the people like your CEOs, your executives, your entrepreneurs, your elite athletes, what have these people done really, really well that's found success for them in other parts of their life? Automation, delegation, and outsourcing.
Yeah.
And so there's 3 things that you cannot automate, delegate, and outsource. It's a solid faith, deep relationships, and optimize health. Those 3 things have to be acted on. They have to take action. They have to take intention. They have to take consistency. They have to take your energy. your work. You have to put in to ultimately get an output. And so that's what the world of marketing in the health space has ultimately taken over. Hey, lose 50 pounds in 50 days, guaranteed. Hey, get the best night's sleep ever on this brand new mattress. Hey
guys, it's Kevin Davis, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about our upcoming workshop, which is going to be on January 11th. We are doing a maxed out marriage mastery workshop, which basically is an introduction to some of the stuff that we do both in marriage with man issues, masculinity issues, health, fitness, and mission, community service, how to be a servant leader. A lot of those different topics we'll be offering. We're going to do a 4-hour workshop, and it's free this time. So feel free to go and sign up at maxedoutmarriage.com/workshop. Hope you'll join us and check it out.
Get the best hydration ever in this IV drip. Well, guess what? You start to see that they're looking after top of the pyramid things, but failing to look after the foundation. And you've built your foundation on a bed of sand. And we wonder why, with more knowledge, more experts, more influencers, we're seeing continued fake health. We're seeing continued degradation of health. We're seeing continued obesity rates. We're seeing continued diabetes rates. We're seeing chronic illnesses being the number one killer in the United States at 71%, 83% if you're talking about entrepreneurs, executives, and business owners. And of those chronic illness deaths being the number one killer in the United States, over 87% of them are preventable. That's the pattern that we've ultimately created. That's the system that we've ultimately created. That's where we're living. And so it takes a level of ownership on our part to say, hey, no, I'm going to be different. I'm not going to conform to normal. I'm not going to conform to the patterns of the world, but rather I'm going to choose something different. And I'm going to step in and figure out what Justin needs, what Kevin needs, so that we can now be so focused on that and almost have like this time energy shield around us that completely eliminates the noise and make sure that we're holistically looking at what our body is requiring. Because here's the other thing, Kevin, we have to understand. Our body doesn't know the difference between mental, physical, spiritual, or emotional stress. Has no clue the difference. You could be in a fight with your spouse. You could be trying to figure out what you want to do with your life. You could be having to lay off people at work. You could be trying to figure out how to scale your business. You could be going for and training for a marathon. And if you looked at your heart rate variability curves, or if you looked at some stress indicators, they would all show the same thing. And so when you know this and you can see this, you're going to start to change the way that you're living. And here's the thing is when we're overreaching, when we're stressing, we need stress in our life. We need stress in order to grow. We need stress in order to become more resilient. We need stress in order to increase our capacity. But we can't constantly live in this stress space. We have to create a rhythm between stress or overreaching and regeneration and recovery. And if we're not creating a rhythm or a life by design or choosing things intentionally and engaging in them consistently, we're never going to perform at the level that we desire. And so that comes back to the definition of performance. Consistency and intentionality around how we're behaving and what we do on a day-to-day basis, our habits. And that's ultimately what shapes our outcomes. Our results are simply a lagging effect of our habits and behaviors. That's it. And so if you don't like your outcomes, if you don't like the way you look, if you don't like the way you feel, if you don't like the energy you have, if you don't like the sleep you're getting, if you don't like the patience level that you have, if you don't like how you act towards your family, if you don't like your patience, look at your habits. Mm-hmm. Go back to what it is that's happening at the core and create a change. And the thing about that, it sounds simple, but where people get the flip and the switch is that they don't know what it is that they need to change. They don't know what it is they need to do. They don't know how to create a system that is going to be sustainable for the long term. And that's why you need data. That's why you need information. That's why you need a team or somebody to help manage that for you so you can put it into place and you just become the executor and you just start acting and behaving.
Yeah, 100%. And I want you to talk more about Own It and what you guys do, because that's something that's actually super interesting to me. But a couple of things that I picked up on, and it was something you said in one of your podcasts where you're talking about cold plunge and sauna. So we can get into that if you want to, but I don't, at risk.
Common beliefs. I'm all about shaking common beliefs.
At risk of you repeating your 19-minute podcast. But that whole idea of not putting additional stress on your body was something that I picked up on, because we talk, I've done cold plunges and I have a little infrared, kind of poor man's sauna in my house. So I'm not doing the 200 degrees thing, but I spend a lot of time in there, and it's more, we can talk more about that. But a lot of times we talk about, hey, should I cold plunge today? Or it's been a while since I've cold plunged. Well, it's like, you've had the crappiest week of sleep that you've had in the last 2 months. Probably not a good idea to do that. It's probably not a good idea for a 6 sets of 3 heavy lifting this week. And so that control is something that was super interesting to me. And just the idea of like the outcome is dynamic in life, right? And it's not guaranteed. I used to work with a guy, and we were in our late 20s, early 30s at this point. And this guy would not spend a freaking dime, because he's like, I've got to save for retirement. I'm like, that's 30 years from now, and you will probably die before then because you're stressing out about every penny. And so like the process of living your life and the process of being fit and having a healthy relationship and having great faith and that in a relationship that way, the process is what's enjoyable. Like it's the journey, right? Because the outcome's not even guaranteed.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is, I've just got so much I want to say.
Dude, we got time. Like, dude, we'll do a Rogan 3 hours if you want. I'm
So here's the funny thing is, and I can take this a couple different directions. The first thing is, we're all in this area where we go, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when. And when we're constantly striving, when we're constantly trying to seek something, we give the example of your friend who is constantly saving money. Oh, I need to save for when I get to retirement. Well, if you've created an artificial finish line for yourself, what happens as soon as you cross that finish line? You still might have 20 years left to go. Mm-hmm. Like, why are you creating an artificial finish line for you? The beauty of this is that you're on a journey that you don't know when it's going to end. You don't know when it's done. I might die tomorrow, yet I might not die for another 80 years. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But I know that my process and my system won't change whether I'm going to die tomorrow or whether I'm going to die in 80 years. Because I want to optimize and make sure that I am showing up in the best version of me so that I can take in single thing that I want to at the highest capacity and the highest level and optimize my potential. Realize here, optimization is not the pursuit of perfection. Optimization is the pursuit of better. Mm-hmm. And we are required to optimize ourselves. If you're not optimizing yourself, what are you doing? You're just okay being average. You're okay being mediocre. You're okay with good enough. Like, why? Why would you not expect more of and have such massive gratitude for the opportunities that you have, from the family that you have, to the business that you have, to the gifts and blessings that have been bestowed upon you? How are you stewarding these things? How are you showing up? And the crazy part is, once you stop striving for that finish line, striving for that perfect body, striving for that perfect business, striving for that perfect family, and you focus on your process and your system, it almost flips around where those things you were striving for actually start chasing you. And your system all of a sudden, man, how'd you lose 35 pounds? Bro, I just got my system right. Mm-hmm. How do you have this deep, rich relationship with your wife? Bro, I just got my system right. How do you have this nurturing relationship with your kids? Man, I just got my system right. How do you sleep well every single night, yet you travel 14 times a month, speaking on 17 different stages, running a 8-figure company, and have a team of 50 people, and still have time to have a completely open Tuesday? Bro, I just got my system right. That's it. I didn't strive for that. I knew what I wanted, but I developed a system in which I showed up differently than what everybody else would say. And all of a sudden, 5 years later, that's your outcome. It's all about showing up consistently and intentionally, and the outcome's inevitable. That's what we have to understand. And when we get to that point, we get to that level, things just start coming back to you because you're stewarding them and managing them in the correct way.
Yeah, I love the stewardship. Obviously I'm a Christian, and from a biblical principle, there's a stewardship, right? Like, you've been given this, whether it's financial blessing, your health, your body, and, be thankful for that, but then be a good steward of it.
Yep.
Which is like, I have a responsibility to stay as fit and healthy and happy as I can. And we use this phrase, this tagline with Maxed Out Man, it's be who you were made to be.
Yeah.
That's part of it. And also start wherever you are, right? Like, I think in what you were just describing, I almost think in Western culture, especially in American culture, that mediocrity would be a step up. We've got 58%. I think I read the other day is the new obesity number, 58 to 62, 28% of kids, like 30% of our kids are obese. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And, it's this idea of continuing to strive. I was thinking about, I have a neighbor that lives next door. He was on the second episode of this podcast, which is super interesting, actually. He was a pastor for 40 years. He's 92 years old. When I go outside in the summer, or this time of year especially, and I hear a chainsaw running from the western direction, I know that Fred is out there cutting firewood and stacking firewood at 92 years old. He is one of the fittest guys that I know. He just continues. This is what he does, right? Then contrast that with other people that are in their 70s. I'm about to be 51. That's 20 years. That's not that far away from me. That are, their whole attitude is, well, you're getting older, right? Like, I have people, drives my wife nuts, because my wife is a fit 50-year-old. She's absolutely stunningly beautiful. She's a total badass. Does welding, and she, helps me build. We built this 3,400 square foot shop together, like all these things that she does. So she'll have like a sore day with her back or whatever. And then someone will tell her, well, you're getting older. This is just how it goes. It's freaking, just sit around and wait for yourself to die. Right. So like that, to your point, we may live to be 120 or 130, but I want to drop dead at whatever age that I am, in the peak, in my optimized state, right? Like, barring something crazy, like, like with your cancer scare, with your colon cancer thing and all that, which obviously your lifestyle and where you were physically made a difference in your ability to not only diagnose yourself, but also to heal from that.
Well, here's the funny thing. And I say this often. I earned my outcome. I earned my outcome because what my habits and behaviors were. I wasn't sleeping well. I was stressed every single day. I was focused on continually serving and not pouring back into myself. Mm-hmm. I was traveling constantly. So even though I was eating well, I was eating inconsistently, and that it ultimately caught up to me. And there's something I call the fake health continuum. On the far left side, we've got death and disease. This is when we enter into some form of chronic illness. You've got diabetes, you've got cancer, you've had a stroke, you've had a heart attack, you've got heart disease. You're getting treated for something. Then on the far right side, you've got true health. What happens in true health is it might look different for everybody, but you wake up in the morning fully fresh, fully vibrant. You pop out of bed, you go, you get your workout in, you come home, you get your kids off to school, you take a look at your to-do list for the day. You've got energy and mental clarity throughout the entirety of it. You come home, you take your kids to soccer, to piano, to whatever practice that looks like. Maybe you've got a social gathering with your spouse or something for your business. You have dinner as a family, you connect with your spouse, you put your head on your pillow at night, you sleep deeply, you wake it up, you do it the next day. It's some iteration of that. Mm-hmm. But 90% of us live in this area called fake health that's disease-free.
Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about our upcoming workshop, which is going to be on January 11th. we are doing a maxed out marriage mastery workshop, which basically is an introduction to some of the stuff that we do both in marriage with man issues, masculinity issues, health, fitness, and mission, community service, how to be a servant leader. A lot of those different topics we'll be offering. We're going to do a 4-hour workshop, and it's free this time. So feel free to go and sign up at maxedoutmarriage.com/workshop. Hope you'll join us and check it out.
But symptom full. Headaches, nausea, bloating, irritability, brain fog, you name it. Like whatever symptom you want, put it in that area. And we justify it. We call it normal. That's what it takes to be a dad. That's what it takes to be a mom. That's what 50 looks like. That's what 60 looks like. That's what it takes to run a business. That's what it takes to operate a business and a family at the same time. All of these things are lies. But yet we've sat in this and been told this over and over and over again. And the crazy part is the longer we stay here and justify these symptoms without changing actions and behaviors, the window to be proactive or preventable to get us into true health starts to close until, boom, the door shuts and it throws us into death and disease. You didn't go to bed one night and wake up with diabetes. You didn't go to bed one night and wake up 40 pounds overweight. You didn't go to bed one night and wake up with cancer. You didn't go to bed one night and wake up with dementia. It was something that was earned over the course of time because your habits and behaviors were not intentional and consistent with where you wanted to go. And if you're honest with yourself, anybody, you can say that. And you can be, it's a hard truth. It's a hard truth to fathom. And I had to come to that realization, man, I need to change. I need to change what I'm doing. I need to change my lifestyle. I need to reprioritize things in my life. I need to redefine what my system looks like and operate in a more purposeful way. And that's where I was ultimately, like all of my research in heart rate variability and stress, understanding that stress is the underlying culprit, because chronic stress, remember, our body doesn't know the difference, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. Chronic stress creates chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation creates chronic symptoms. Chronic symptoms we say are normal. The longer we live there, chronic symptoms create chronic illness. That's why chronic illness is the leading cause of death in the United States. So how do we solve this? How do we get to a better baseline? How do we get to a better number underneath? Well, we can start to talk about all the different ways in which we can start to personalize things and look at our metrics and our numbers. But even as we get to the baseline habits, we created 8 little areas, 8 parts of your life that you can start to change. Fundamental principles that need to be established, habits in each of these areas. Number 1, training and movement. How are we exercising? How are we moving throughout the day? Notice there's 2, right? Training and movement. It's not good enough to go get an hour workout in and then be chained to your desk for 11 hours throughout the day, only to come home and go sit. You basically go from the box of your bed to the box of your car to the box of your office, back to the box of your car, back to the box of your home, watching your box at night, eating from a box, sleeping in a box, ultimately to end up in a coffin. Another box. It's like we just have this box life. Let's change that. Let's get outside. Let's move. So training and movement is number 1. What does that look like? Number 2 is nutrition. Obviously, we've got habits around this. We're not talking about diets. I'm talking about portion sizes, meal frequency, timing, portion control,
nutrient density, right?
Nutrient density, all this stuff, right? Let's get into hydration. Half your body weight in ounces. Let's look at quantity. Let's look at quality. What type of water? Are we putting electrolytes in? Are we operating this way? And we'll start to get into all of these common beliefs that we can shake here in a second. 4, you start to look at sleep, right? Do we have a consistent sleep and wake time? Do we have a night routine? 3 hours before bed, no food. 2 hours before bed, no work. 1 hour before bed, no blue light. Do we have a wake up routine? Are we getting outside in the morning? What does this look like to optimize circadian rhythms? We can start to design around this. Immune function. Are we getting hot exposure, sauna, steam room, hot tub? Are we getting a cold plunge, cold exposure certain times per week? Are we having a multivitamin per day? Are we knowing what supplementation is good for our body and what we need at the cellular level versus what we don't and what's a waste of time? Then we get into, so we've got now 5, right? Immune function.
Yep.
Environment. Okay. Environment. What's our environment like? What type of people are we around? What music are we listening to? What's our bedroom look like in terms of environment? Is it cold? Is it dark? Does it smell adequate? Do we do other things in there? Like, what does that look like for us? What's our work environment like? Do we get outside throughout the day? Do we see the sunrise? Do we see the sunset? Like, what are these environmental factors that oftentimes we just give away?
Mm-hmm.
Self-care. What does our self-care look like? How are we pouring back into ourselves?
I'm sorry, men don't do that.
And see, here's the thing. Self-care is always thought to be like, oh, I'll get my nails done, I'll get a massage. No, self-care, the definition, something you only do for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was sarcasm.
Facetious, I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell this story all the time. We had a New York Times bestselling author, 4 times on the list, written 30 plus books. He's like, Justin, I've got mental block. I've got brain fog. I'm irritable. I can't think. I've never had this happen in the course of my writing career. I said, well, when's the last time you did something for you? He's like, bro, I got 5 kids, a wife that wants to spend time with me, and a book deal that's due in 6 weeks. I'm like, I'm just stressed out to the max. I said, well, here's what we're going to do. What's something that you would typically only do for yourself? He's like, I love to water ski. The guy lives on a lake with a boat with a kid that loves to ski and drive the boat. So I said, why don't you go out 3 days a week for an hour? Just allow yourself to be out there, pour back into yourself, fill your cup back up, allow yourself to have a little bit of space and clarity. He's like, I can't do that. You don't understand. I've got something I have to do. I was like, no, you don't understand. This is going to allow you to have the capacity to do it. Remember, he had the desire. He didn't have the capacity. And so 2 weeks later, he calls me. I hear the wind in the background. It's like noon. I was like, bro, I told you to go in the morning. Like, go in the morning, like get out of the way so you can have he's like, we've been out here for 6 hours. It's amazing. On my last run, like at 8 o'clock this morning, I started to just have these downloads and I wrote the book. It's all done. It's in my head. All I gotta do is go write it out. This is awesome. That's all it is self-care. What is it that you do for you? Is it taking your dog for a walk? Is it playing video games? Is it watching a stupid show on TV? Is it going and shooting guns in the backyard? Is it going and throwing darts? Is it just watching the clouds float around? Is it reading a book? Is it journaling? Like, what is that to you? Is it getting your nails done? Is it going for a massage? Is it going and laying in the sauna? Is it like, there's so many things, but if we create a list, we can now start to figure out what self-care parameters are actually there for you. And then the last one is mindset. Is what are we doing to bolster our mindset? What are we doing to build our mindset, build capacity and resiliency in this area? So we now have a whole new way of thinking and a whole new process of how we show up. And so if you look at these 8 areas, training and movement, you've got mindset, sleep, immune response, nutrition, hydration, self-care, and environment. If you look at these 8 areas, there's a bunch of habits that are just foundational principles, just fundamental basics that if you are not operating within or you don't have a designed life around them, then you don't need all the upper echelon, the peptides, the red lights, the hormone therapies, the tools, the testing. Like, let's get your baseline foundations set up. Let's get the habit structure in place. Let's have heart rate variability as the metric that you're reliant on to see how your body's adapting to stress and strain. If you're seeing heart rate variability trend up, it's a direct sign that you are adapting to the stress and strain really well. You've created a really nice rhythm between overreaching and regeneration. The habits that you have in place, the design that you have in place is working. So let's double and triple down on what you're doing. Let's keep moving in this direction. Let's keep optimizing. Now, let's get some testing done. Now, let's do your cellular testing so we can get a little bit more specific so that we at Own It can build your custom supplementation for you. Let's get some DNA and epigenetic testing done so we can see what some predispositions are from food sensitivities or inflammatory markers in your body that we can start to shift your diet and nutrition a little bit. Let's get your VO2 max testing done so that we can actually start to program what heart rate zones you should be in for zone 2 work. Conversely, where you should be at for long training runs or interval work that we're doing. Let's get some hormone therapy done, some hormone testing done so we can see where we need to start changing some morning and night routines based upon cortisol and melatonin interaction. Like, we can start to get to this level, But man, let's make sure we get our habits in place first. Let's make sure we build a life by design first. Let's make sure we get the foundation set. So we're not going on a foundation of sand, but rather going on a steadfast rock base that is so solid that no matter what storm blows through, no matter what life throws at you, you have something to rely on. And you're not all of a sudden waking up one morning with some form of chronic illness that you now have to adapt to.
Man, first of all, that's awesome. And that's a lot. And I feel called out on at least 7 of those 8 areas. But I want to touch, one of the things I do on this podcast is like, if I had a psychologist on, I'm like, hey, I need you to diagnose this part of my life. And so like as a fitness expert, as a life optimization guy, right, there's 2 areas that I struggle with in particular on that list. It's, first of all, it's self-care. I run 4 different businesses. I'm like you, right? Like you always have all this stuff going, but I suck at having hobbies. I'm just not great at doing that. And I kind of suck at taking that time to just rest. I was reading the other day about toxic productivity which is a real thing. And it's like on Sunday, right? Like I was like, all right, I'm going to sit down and watch this movie, and I can't remember what. I only watch movies from like 20 years ago because I don't like much modern movies, but I'm watching this movie. So the movie's over and I'm like, I have not taken a day off in like a month. And my wife's gone for 2 weeks, which actually makes it even harder for me because I'm working 15 hours a day because she's not here and I don't really have any balance in my life other than my 2 dogs. But like I have a conversation with her. We're talking about some financial strain that we're kind of dealing with right now, some different banking type stuff. And then I couldn't shut my brain off. So then I had to go to my computer. I'm editing video. It's like, so like the self-care aspect I suck at. So I want to talk about that because this is, my podcast and we can talk about me. We
can talk about whatever you want.
And then the other thing, which I've talked to a lot of people about this and I'm super interested in this. So if I'm a 6.5 hour sleep guy.
Oh, this is good. I love this.
And so I want to talk about this because I am 100% open to ideas about this, but
I love it. So let's start with the self-care.
So let me finish the sleep thing real quick. So I'm a guy that literally, if I'm not asleep in about 35 or 40 seconds, I always have this joke. Like there's this guy with a big switch that literally just shuts me off. So I want to give you this full background, right? So that's at night. I'm asleep. If I go to sleep at 10, I woke up at freaking 4:30 this morning because I went to sleep at 10, but I'm wide awake. I'm out of bed within 45 seconds. I feel rested. I'm awake. On occasion, if I feel like I need a nap, like I'm getting, a lot of times it's probably blood sugar related or whatever. I can lay down, go to sleep, wake up 7 to 12 minutes later, and I'm ready to go. Like it's like plugging in your phone. So anyway, that's the background. So I want to talk about those things, especially the sleep thing, because I've never been able to figure this out.
I love it. So let's start with the self-care because this will be pretty quick to just dive right into. So number one, it's all a prioritization thing. And so a very easy baseline is to say, hey, I'm going to commit to 30 minutes of self-care per day. 30 minutes, that's it. And what that allows you to do is kind of like you talked about with the nap. It's almost like plugging in your phone where you're going to get a jolt of freedom, a jolt of energy, a jolt of clarity and mind space, pause, stillness. Because what happens, how many times have you been struggling with an answer? Like, man, how do I figure this out? What does this look like? What do I need? And all of a sudden you're showering one night and you're like, there it is. Mm-hmm. Or you're at the grocery store and you're like, gosh, that's the answer. All that happened was you created space. And you've got something in your brain called the reticular activating system that our brain is like the best Google engine and the best AI system times 50. And if you ask it a question, it's constantly going to be seeking the answer and it's going to try to help you find it. But in order to do that, it needs time and space. And so if you give yourself 30 minutes of self-care a day, it's not that you're no longer being proactive, or pardon me, it's no longer that you're not being productive. It's actually that you're allowing your system to become more productive with you doing less because you've already done the work. You've already done the hard work. You've already put in the effort of figuring out the question, of working for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. And this 30 minutes is now allowing your brain to work on hyperspeed. And so the best way in order to start to use self-care time is to create what I call a self-care buffet. Because you don't want to have to make a decision, because decision fatigue is real, about how to spend your self-care time. So what I have is on my calendar, I have 30-minute blocks. And I don't use all 30-minute blocks. I usually have 2 or 3 a day. And I don't use all of them, but I use one. And right over there on my wall, I've got my self-care buffet. So I've got 19 different things. Walk the dog. I'm just reading it. Walk the dog, sauna, hot tub, read, stretch, yoga, hockey, shoot the ball, throw the ball, skipping, walking, lay in the hammock, and I can't read the last one. But all I do is I simply go, hey, what do I feel like doing right now? What feels good and aligned to me? What feels like is something that's going to be great in order for me to recharge? I grab it and I go. The other thing I have is once every 2 weeks, I have a 60-minute massage on my calendar. Wednesday at noon, every second Wednesday. It's a standing appointment. I don't have to think about it. I don't need to plan it. It just happens. And that's how, again, I stay proactive and ahead of my self-care time. And it just occurs and it just happens. And I can't tell you how many times I'm laying in my sauna. I mean, I literally wrote my book in my self-care time.
That's
I'd be
awesome.
laying there. Oh, this idea. Boom, away I go. I'll be sitting trying to create a PowerPoint for my keynote. I'm like, man, like, how does this flow? How does it go? I'll go pop into the sauna. I'll go lay out in the hammock. Oh, there it is. Boom, done. Like,
and you just let that, do you just let that ruminate at that point and do it after your time? Or are you actively like, hey, I got to grab my phone and get this stuff down before it goes away? Or I'm just curious on how that.
So that's the other thing. I have a little notebook with me all the time.
Okay.
And even beside my bed, all these things. And I'll write it down. Just write a note so I remember it whenever, and it can jog me back to where I was. But I just write it down and put it away. Write it down, put it away. I don't continue to keep ideating on it. Just write it down, put it away. It's like the cloud comes in, recognize it, let it go.
I love it.
And so that's what that self-care time becomes. But create that buffet. It'll change the game for you in such a massive way. And then give yourself 30 minutes. Super, super simple.
I'm definitely doing that. I have an extra whiteboard literally sitting in my corner right there. So I'm going to get that whiteboard. I'm going to make my list. And when you come back to talk about your book in a couple of months, I will report to you. That'll be my accountability. Right. So
good. So good. Now let's dive into sleep. I love sleep. It's one of, we work with probably 9 different pro teams, just on sleep alone.
Wow.
2 of them are in the final 4 of the Major League Baseball season. So it's kind of exciting. We'll have at least 1 team in the World Series, which will be cool. But when you look at this, sleep is literally like the superpower. It's something that completely changes the game for us. And one of the common beliefs, and I've literally got this in one of my PowerPoints, and we can dive into more of these common beliefs, but one of the common beliefs is that you need 8 hours plus in order to get adequate sleep. And that's just not true. Quantity doesn't equal quality, which is another reason why I like to track sleep. And the 2 things that we look at, sleep and heart rate variability, those are the 2 biggest needle movers, biggest rocks in terms of getting information back from your body as to how are you working, how are you showing up, how are the habits and behaviors ultimately shaping your long-term health, and how are you going to be energetically and performance-wise. And so if you look at the quantity of sleep that you're getting, we sleep in 90-minute segments. So a typical sleep cycle takes 90 minutes in order to get through. And so you're going to have 4 different sleep cycles, or 4 different segments in that sleep cycle. It's going to be a light sleep. It's going to be a slow wave sleep or deep sleep. It's going to be a REM sleep, and then a little wake cycle. If in one of those cycles, you're spending about 50+% in slow wave and REM sleep, quality sleep, that means that's an optimal sleep. Like you're getting really high quality sleep, really, really positive, really, really good. And so if you think about these.
Yeah, I want to say, so I've not used a wearable, which I need to.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about the wearables that you recommend, but like I've done the little, set your phone on the nightstand kind of thing. And it tracks that through your breathing and, kind of basically it's just a microphone, right? So it's not very accurate, but my graph literally is like, all right, 2 minutes in, it drops down to the thing. And then it stays that way for like hours, which is not accurate, obviously, but it
yeah. So I think you're using, from what I'm understanding, you're using just Apple, like what Apple's tracking.
Well, this would be like, it's called a sleep cycle. It's some app basically, but it's using the microphone on your phone is essentially, it's listening to your breathing and your patterns. And I think that's how it determines it, but it's not accurate, but.
Yeah. So the big thing is we want to look at actually sleep staging. And once we can understand that, it's going to help us. So think about this, the tradition or what everybody has always said is 8 hours of sleep. Well, if you're getting 5 sleep cycles a night, that totals up to 7.5 hours of sleep. And 4 to 5 sleep cycles is what's required on a weekly basis to be at optimal levels of sleep.
Interesting.
So somewhere between 6 and 7.5 hours is what you need for optimal sleep time. 4 to 5 sleep cycles, 6 to 7.5 hours. So that old myth of needing 8 hours is no longer relevant because you can be getting 8 hours, but not even getting the quality of sleep. If you're getting 50% plus REM and deep sleep at 6 hours versus 25 to 30% at 8 hours, your 6-hour sleep is actually more beneficial. You're actually getting more out of it. And so how do we now determine how do we get a really high quality sleep? Well, there's so many different things we can do, but kind of like I gave you here, 3-2-1 rule before going to bed. 3 hours before bed, no more food. Why? When we take in food, we've got 400 times more melatonin in our gut than is produced by our brain. So if we're having to take in food, now our stomach's going to have to digest everything. We're not going to get the melatonin release we need. If we don't get the melatonin release we need, we're going to have elevated cortisol levels. If we have elevated cortisol levels, we're not going to get to the depth of sleep that's required. And we're ultimately going to have a hard time falling asleep. So that's number one. Eliminate big meals 3 hours before bed. 2 hours before bed, get rid of all work, all heavy decision making. Set a boundary in place. So if we're going to sleep at a consistent sleep and wake time, let's call it 10 p.m. At 8 p.m., we're no longer working. Let's shut it off. That's no emailing, no text messaging, no figuring out schedules, no worrying about what the decisions we have to make tomorrow. Set a boundary. Just put it away and allow yourself to start coming down, because I can't tell you how many people tell me all the time, Justin, I just can't sleep at night because my mind won't stop. No, your mind can stop. You just don't stop.
Right.
And so when you constantly, again, go back to this, when you constantly ask yourself questions, it's constantly seeking an answer. And so if we don't allow space to start to shut ourselves down and get more parasympathetic, more relaxed, we're constantly going to stay in that stress state, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional stress. Body doesn't know the difference. And so we're going to stay in this stress state, elevated cortisol levels, thus decreased melatonin levels, not get into the quality of sleep we need, and it's going to be interruptive all night. Then 1 hour before bed, no blue light. Now, does that mean that we don't watch TV or we get rid of all these things? No, I watch TV at night. That's something that I love, that just my wife and I, we curl up and we watch a show, something dumb, just allows our minds to kind of go and kind of shut off. That's how we wind down.
We do the same thing. Yep.
But we'll wear blue light blockers. We'll wear blue light blocking glasses, or on the TV, we'll take out the blue light emitting. We'll put like the filter on, and that's how we operate, and that's how we go. And during that last hour, so at 9 o'clock, 9 to 10, before we end up in bed, I've got a night routine. One, I have a cool shower, something that just allows my body temperature to start to drop a little bit. I brush my teeth. While I'm brushing my teeth, I get into I've got a yoga mat I lay out and I just kind of stretch a little bit. I wash my face. As soon as I wash my face, I read about 5 minutes of my Bible. I lay down in bed. My wife and I talk for about 30 seconds to 2 minutes, depending on how long it is before I start dozing off. And then I'm out. And so that's kind of like that night routine that you're preparing for, that you're setting yourself up for. And I think so often we forget that sleep, we should spend 1/3 of our life approximately sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
If it's so important, don't you think we should prepare for it? But yet we forget to prepare. And in that preparation, it can really start to help us. And so that's kind of going to bed. When we're waking up, we want to be exposed to 4 things. Heat. So I've got an 8 sleep on my bed. So I crank that thing up. So I'm waking up nice and warm. I'm going right from there. I'm grabbing water, which is going to have element, which is electrolyte mix that's got potassium, magnesium, and sodium. That's going to prime my cells to absorb the water that I need. Again, we can get into a common myth about why water is just not enough. So water, first thing in the morning. I'm going to go into the sauna and I'm going to do breath work. Okay. Expedited breath. So 2 in through the nose, 1 out through the mouth, a Wim Hof breath, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as I come out of there, I'm either, if the sun hasn't come up yet, I'm getting exposed to my red light. So resetting circadian rhythm, really waking every aspect of my body up. Or if the sun's coming up, I'm watching the sunrise for 3-4 minutes and just allowing myself to be in that space, getting first morning sun. Now everyone's like, oh my gosh, Justin, how long does that take in the morning? No way I could do that. That takes me all of about 21 minutes. And before and what that does is it resets circadian rhythm, optimizes cortisol levels, gets you prepared and energetically set for the day. And from there, I go to the gym. And all of a sudden, you're like, man, why do you have the energy you have throughout the day? Why can you show up that way? And that's what I would kind of just continue to come back to you and say, when you're waking up, wake up and get up. Don't go back into another sleep cycle because you won't take yourself through. You're going to wake up, you're going to be groggy and all of these things. Take advantage of that. Get a morning routine such as that. But then when you need to have a nap and you start to get a little bit tired, I love what you said. Nap should either be less than 15 minutes or an hour and a half. Nothing in between.
Right.
Nothing in between. Because if you start to have that, you're waking yourself in the middle of the sleep cycle, which is going to just cause a whole issue with circadian rhythm. So now, Kevin, I'm going to do a little math here because we're going to give you and help you find your optimal nap time. So what is your typical bedtime and your typical wake up time?
Usually between 10 and 11 to go to sleep. And then I'm almost always, like the last week, my wife has been gone. I've woken up between 5:06 and 5:08 every day for like nine days in a row. So let's call it 10:30. So somewhere between 10:30 to like, let's say 5 o'clock or 5:30 is typically.
Okay. So let's go with that. So we're talking about 7 hours. So if we cut 7 in half, that's 3.5, right? So 3.5 added on to 10.5. So 10:30 at night, right? So we'll go 3.5. So it takes us to 11 to 12, 1, 2. So 2 o'clock in the morning. And then because our circadian rhythm runs on 12-hour shifts, 2 in the morning to 2 p.m. 2 p.m. is your optimal sleep window. So 2 to 2:30. So if we can have a 7 to 14-minute nap at between 2 and 2:30, that is going to, again, optimize your circadian rhythm to make sure it doesn't disrupt your sleep at night, doesn't take you out of your rhythm throughout the rest of the day. And that's how you want to do that. So again, for everybody listening, take your average sleep time and wake time, get the total hours, divide that by 2, add that number to your average sleep time, whatever number that is, just take it on a 12-hour clock. So flip AM to PM, and that becomes your optimal nap time.
And that's in lieu of hitting 200 milligrams of caffeine at 2 in the afternoon.
Well, here's the other thing is
because if I don't quote unquote have time for a nap, I'm a little bit scientific and crazy about it, but I actually use caffeine pills because I can say, okay, I want 50 milligrams. I want 100 milligrams because they're 200 milligram tabs. And this is a not good habit. I'm not recommending this at all.
Can we dive into the science of this?
I love it, dude. I like to use the big word edifying, but this is like super interesting and edifying to me as a person. So like, I'm all about this. I could talk to you all day, but
Oh, I love it. So if we look at caffeine, so caffeine has a 8 to 10 hour half-life in your body. So if you're taking in, let's call it 200 milligrams of caffeine at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're not exercising heavily and using that as the stimulant to like actually get it out of your system and expedite it, that caffeine, let's just call it at 10 p.m. at night, is still going to, so 8 hours later, is going to have 100 milligrams still active in your system.
Because I usually lift it just as a data point. I usually lift at about 4. So I'll do cardio and lift again. I do my morning cardio as part of my morning routine. But I usually lift at around 4 o'clock.
So I'd be curious if we were to actually use something that didn't have caffeine in it to get you your lift, something like nitric oxide. So beets or red cabbage or aronia berries or something like that, that's going to give you natural nitric oxide boost without the caffeine use. So you still have that energy flow without having the overhaul of caffeine. Because here's the thing, there's something called adenosine that's in your brain. And what adenosine does is it binds to the brain receptors that ultimately tells your body it's time for sleep. It's time to wind down. But what happens is adenosine molecules and caffeine molecules look the exact same. They're the same shape. So the caffeine molecules bind to those receptor sites in our brain, and adenosine has nothing to bind to. So we have adenosine deficiency in the brain, meaning we're staying awake, we're more alert, and thus we're not getting into the depth and quality of sleep that's necessary. So if you're able to eliminate caffeine use and supplement with something like I said, a nitric oxide booster or a beta alanine or something like that, that still gives you that energy lift when you're going to do your workout or your lift at night, that's going to be much better than taking a caffeine stimulant at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, I know I have bad habits, but in like all of them together, I think I'm ahead of the curve for myself, but I definitely have big room, different parts of my system that I need to improve for sure. And
that's the thing there. This is what I love. Like, there is no perfection. There's things that mine aren't perfect, but I'm constantly iterating. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly taking in data and feedback and going forward. Like for me, there's 4 non-negotiables that I would love everybody to at least touch on and know where they're at. Number 1 is heart rate variability. If you're not measuring heart rate variability, you've got your head in the sand and you're missing a massive, massive tool that can help guide, educate, and empower you on where you're going. Number 2, if you don't have, let's call it once a year, a 2 or 3 week measuring cycle or measuring time of blood glucose, massive, massive miss, because I want to know the food that I'm eating, even though I might be fit, even though I might be extremely healthy, quote unquote, even though I might eat whole foods and think that I'm doing the right things, I might be having massive blood glucose fluctuations. And that's a massive stressor on the body that you don't even know about. I had a client the other day who got his blood glucose monitor, and within the first 3 days, he had 4 or 5 spikes that hit him up to, and again, with blood glucose, you should be somewhere between 95 and 110 throughout the day at all times. That's kind of nice, showing nice stability. But he would go up to 205, 210, 3 to 4 times a day. And I was like, what's happening there? He's like, I have no idea. Like, I eat really well. I have the same thing for lunch every day. I have the same thing for dinner almost every day. Breakfast, I sometimes have it, I sometimes don't. I was like, well, what happened at this time, and this time? And he thinks, and he's sitting there. He goes, oh, I walk by my business partner's desk, and he always has Skittles on his desk. And I just grab
a handful of Skittles.
And I take a handful of Skittles. He's like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this. And next day, he didn't do it. Didn't even have the spikes. And so it's this new awareness. He's like, gosh, I didn't even know that. I completely forgot that I do that. And I was like, that's not a big deal. But your body keeps the score. Your body knows what's happening. And so that is something your body has to adapt to. So that's number 2. Number 3 is if VO2 max. If you're not getting a VO2 max number at least once a year, maybe twice if you want to start to change some things. I do it once every couple months because I adjust my training cycles off of that. It's a massive indicator of longevity. And
that's basically a treadmill test with the full respirator and measuring O2 and all that stuff, right?
Again, everything I'm talking about, we do through Own It and how we package it all together to make sure that we can figure out what's actually happening, design your life, design each capacity so that you can increase it for you and build a plan across the board, and then have accountability team members with you and have a medical team that we do all of this to kind of maximize this. But yes, you have a mask over your nose and mouth. Again, I've got it so it's portable, so there's no strings, there's no anything. It's just
that's awesome.
Simple mask. It's super easy. And what we're able to do is look at heart rate zonings, like where are you at when certain things happen? What's actually occurring when you're entering to a new zone, or lactate threshold 1, lactate threshold 2? What's your biological age, meaning inside, how is your body aging versus where are you at chronologically? So we can get a lot of quality numbers from this to be able to then give you more access and kind of eye-opening moments. And then the fourth one, which for me is a non-negotiable, is cellular blood testing. So what a lot of people have is, and even a lot of companies out there, they'll say, let's do your blood testing and then supplement you on that. Well, what they're measuring is they're looking at a cellular, they're not looking at the cellular component, they're looking at the blood serum. So a CBC or a CMP, so complete blood count or a complete metabolic panel, it's just looking at your serum protein. So you could have high levels of vitamin C, high levels of vitamin D, high levels of B12, high levels of sodium, high levels of calcium, high level, like all of these in your serum. But in the cell, you're actually deficient. What that means is that your body can't actually use the raw material that's in your system. It's missing it. So you could have high levels, but you're missing the cofactor to pull it into the cell where your body can actually use it. So your body's like, man, I'm starving for this. You see so many people who have a slight vitamin D deficiency or a slight vitamin C deficiency in their serum, yet they supplement vitamin C all the time. They supplement vitamin D all the time. They don't notice a difference in their mood. They don't notice a difference in their immunity. Well, it's because you go and you do a cellular test and you're actually functionally deficient in it. And it's not getting in there, and you're just basically supplementing and peeing it all out, not having any type of use factor for it. And so when we see what's actually happening at the cellular level and we notice there's deficiency, we can actually custom formulate supplementation for you so that we have the cofactors that are going to pull it into the cell, as well as the raw material that your body can use, so that now we can eradicate cellular deficiency. And now our body's moving, adjusting based upon what it's needing at the time and the season that you're in. And we can start to adjust for that. And so those are those 4 things that once we start to measure each one of these, what you measure gets managed, what gets managed improves. And that's how we can continue to keep shaping this and build that life by design in a very powerful way.
I'm ready to sign up. So I have to come to Miami though, right? It's in.
We're 100% virtual. We
everything's virtual. So you send out the testing, and you say everybody does that. Well,
yeah,
okay.
We work in 3 different countries: so Canada, US, and the UK. And we send everything out. We send a phlebotomist to your home. That all comes back to the lab. We've got a team of about 45 different coaches. So all your coaches are functional medicine specialists, registered dietitians, and strength coaches. So they've got all 3 designations. So your health coach is going to have that. You've got a medical advisor, an MD or an ND that oversees everything, oversees your whole process. We've got mindset performance coaches, if we're going to go that route as well with you, that are all cognitive behavioral therapists. So you've literally got your concierge team built around you that's going to help guide, educate, and hold you accountable to what you're doing, while also giving you the information that you need that you can take action on. And we can see quantifiably how you're improving and how our body's adapting and where we're going, not just based off of subjective feel.
Is it expensive? I don't want to call you out on that. I mean, I would guess there's different affordability options, right, in order to make that work. But when you start talking about like that's a very high level of care, right?
Totally.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
like it's amazing. Yeah, like dude, I would love to just sign up right now and make it happen. But
Yeah. So there's, like I said, we like to make sure that we can touch multiple.
and I'm not trying to call you out. I'm just trying to answer the question that probably a lot of people might have.
Yeah.
When we're
So
talking about this stuff.
we range from $500 a month to $5,000 a month,
Okay.
depending on what you want, the level of care, the depth of care, the amount of accountability, the amount of guidance, the amount of coaching, whether it's one-on-one or whether it's more group-based.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, actually, I even lied. Our group program that we keep you in small groups of about 5 to 10 people, $299 a month, I think. So somewhere between $299 and $5,000.
Yeah, that's honestly, that's super affordable. And if you think about where that money is going currently, like to be able to divert funds, and honestly, it's a hell of a lot cheaper than open heart surgery. I could tell you that for sure.
I would say it's cheaper than your treatment. And
yeah.
It comes back to kind of what I said at the beginning to you, Kevin, was what are the three most important things to you?
Mm-hmm.
Your health, your family, your faith. Well, if I took one of those from you, what would you give?
Yeah.
Anything and everything. And so why don't we manage it better? And this is how we can manage it. And the cool part about it is how we show up in this world, and what our real mission was to redeem the health of the world. That's our mission.
Love it.
And when we talk about redemption, when we talk about redeeming, it's not about telling you what to do. It's not about giving you a blank bulk program. It's about teaching, educating, and empowering you to be able to take ownership of your own health, and how having a system and a strategy that's been built for you uniquely that you can now make sustainable. That doesn't have to be just for a season, but it can now become your lifestyle, because that's how you're ultimately going to be able to perform at the end of the day. Increase capacity, match with desire through intentional and consistent behaviors makes your outcomes inevitable.
Yeah.
And when we live that way, when you now have the system that we're just building for you and handing to you, and you understand it, it changes the game, because you now can take ownership of that. You're not reliant on a person, place, or thing. And that's our goal, and that's our mission, so that everybody coming through our system can take it, run with it, and do this for the rest of their life.
And it's data driven. That's what I mean. The amount of money that people waste on just, trying this supplement or doing these things. And it's just the ineffectiveness of it. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but from, even stupid stuff like you're using your treadmill that you have at the house as a coat rack, or as a, to dry your clothes on. I mean, even if you spent $500 on that, right? Like that's a waste of money. So there's so many ways, or frickin' beer money and all these, whatever else you're spending all that money on is definitely something that you can invest better in your health. And having the data to do it is an efficiency thing, right? Like you're not guessing. Right. I do want to ask you one thing before, and I want to be respectful of your time, but so the genetic testing aspect of it, I want to ask you, so this is where your common myths thing go in. There's this new trend now. My wife had some genetic testing done. She had some family members genetic testing done. And one of her family members actually had, and, this is made famous by Angelina Jolie and, some of these other women, where they're actually having parts of their body removed based on genetic testing. Like they're getting radical mastectomies because the genetic testing told them that they have this precursor gene that ultimately will give them breast cancer. Right. And I it was made famous by Angelina Jolie. She had both breasts removed at some point. And then I know personally of several women that have actually had this done. And it just makes me completely cringe. I mean, we don't want to talk about all the other unnecessary surgeries going on right now, but that seems really crazy to me that you would use probability to define surgery? And this is a totally, it's not off topic,
No.
but it's kind of a left,
Totally.
off in left field.
I want to answer this, and then I want to go back to the thing you talked about, cold plunging, because I've got a really real time example on this. But so I was standing on a panel, and there was a Harvard professor, a doctor from the Mayo Clinic, myself, and I can't remember where the other person was, but there's 4 of us on this panel. And they brought up this study, and it was a genetic study. And a lot of doctors in the crowd and stuff like that. And they ended up citing this study that said that 80% of children who have obese parents will be obese. And the doctors were saying, yep, genetic predisposition to obesity, and this is where this comes from. And I let them go on for about 5-6 minutes. And then there was a little pause. And I said, can I interrupt? And I had been a little bit contrarian on this panel already, and
I can imagine, given who you just listed. So
you could kind of see people kind of rolling their eyes. And I said, "Can you please tell me the obesity gene? Can you tell me what that is?" And nobody said anything. I said, "The reason that there's an 80% chance that you're going to have an obese child with 2 obese parents is because of the environment they're in, because of the food they're eating, because of the lack of movement, because of the habits, behaviors that they're going to be engaging in, and what they're exposed to. If the parents are obese, they're probably not eating well. They're probably not exercising very much. They're probably not engaged in sports. They're probably sitting at home at night. They're probably eating a lot of artificial sugars. They're probably drinking pop and sodas and all these other things. That's probably what's happening, and that's why. Not because they're genetically predisposed." And I tell that story because you come back to even like predisposed for anxiety, predisposed for hypertension, predisposed for hypernatremia or hyperglycemia, whatever you want, predisposed for diabetes. Show me the gene. Show me the gene that creates that. Show me the gene that is the direct causation. If you have this, there is none. God
like correlation versus causality, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so coming back to what you're saying is it's not that you're going to develop cancer from a certain gene. It's that the lifestyles, behaviors, and habits that you're engaging in will ultimately cause that gene to mutate or change or create the outcomes that you're leaning towards. So no, don't go get a surgery, but rather look yourself in the mirror and what do I have to do differently? How do I have to live differently? How do I have to take ownership of my health in a different way so that that doesn't occur? Do I need to get in front of a red light every single day? Do I need to have a hyperbaric oxygen chamber that I go in once or twice a week? I don't know. I don't know what those answers are because I don't know what your direct issue is. Once I have your data, once I have your information, once I have this deep understanding of what's going on within you, then we can create your individualized protocol of what you need to do in your system so you can realize this true health. You can realize life in a different way, and you can realize it in a very positive way.
You want to talk about, I love that. We had a little bit of an argument at the time. I'm like, I don't even know why we want this data. Like, because the data is meaningless. All it's going to do is create anxiety unnecessarily based on some like crazy probability stuff that doesn't, because she always exercises, she eats right, all these things. And not that my wife has any direct, like, it's not like her mom had breast cancer, or like she didn't have it. But when we had this initial discussion, she was like, well, this person in my family had this and her daughters had it. And so she had this thing done to her. And I'm like, holy crap, why would that just seems crazy to me. But
here's some common beliefs, and it's funny that you say that. Here's some common beliefs I literally talk about on stage, and I debunk and I demyth and all of these things. So cold plunging is always good. Colder is always better. Multivitamin and whole food diets provide my body with the nutrients it needs. Running will help me lose weight. More cardio is what's going to give me optimal health. DNA testing determines your health outcomes. Blood testing from my doctor is all that I need to understand what I need to start supplementing. Peptides and hormone therapy is the answer to energy loss and low testosterone. Drinking water alone hydrates you. Getting 8 hours of sleep is the minimum sleep requirement. Caffeine is great for energy. Vitamin C will help my immune system. Wine or melatonin is great for helping me sleep well. Morning routine is the only way to have a perfect day. Your to-do list is self-care. You can make health a priority once you're successful. The harder you work, the more you succeed. All of these are like things that I've heard thousands of times, that we have made truths in our lives that really shift our behaviors in a way that are unhealthy, where instead, if we actually just knew more about this thing we lived in, if we knew how to act, behave, and have a system that was designed in a more positive way, we could really flourish and move and realize life and thrive in a far, far different degree than what we've quoted normal in where we are. We want to strive for different.
Yeah. And it's not, like you said at the beginning, it's actually not that hard. It's like, it takes simple, even if you didn't have the data, there are some simple things that you can do in your life to make improvements.
8 foundational principles.
Yeah.
8 foundational principles. Each have I've got a list of about 10 to 15 baseline habits that if you're not acting upon any of these, or there's a big gap, start there. And that's where you go. I mean, you asked about cold plunging. So I've been on this. I've been holding this story since you asked about this, but I'll throw it in really quick. Last week, I keynoted 9 times. I was in 5 different cities, 4 different states. And I left on a Sunday night. I got back on a Saturday afternoon. Well, coming home, a little bit tired, was looking forward to being home, still had energy, still felt pretty good. Woke up on Sunday and I was just not feeling the best. I could feel like my nervous system was shot. I was a little bit tingly. I just didn't feel very well. And typically people would be like, oh, you cold plunge every day. This is what you do. Well, on Sunday, I went for a zone 2 bike ride for about 20 minutes, 125 to 137 of my heart rate. I went in the sauna for about 30 minutes. I had a nice warm shower coming out of there. I took a nap in the afternoon. I went to church. I made sure I fueled well all day. I overhydrated. Monday, I woke up and same type of thing, was feeling better, far better than I was on Sunday. Did the same thing, stretched, took my workout from the volume I was supposed to do to about half, and then still hit the zone 2 and still hit the sauna, and then made sure I got into bed a little bit earlier. Woke up this morning, firing on all cylinders, just crushing it. My HRV typically is about 97. Sunday and yesterday was about 82, so depleted. Today, 109. So I'm ready. This morning, hit a hard workout, hit the sauna, finished with the cold plunge, hit 10 miles this morning on top of that, and I feel great. Now, what people would typically do is continue to go, no, this is my morning routine. This is what I do. I sauna, I cold plunge. Well, realize that cold plunging is a stressor. I realized very quickly early on in my journey that if I cold plunged every single day, it would not be 10 days before I got sick. Yeah. 10 days before I got a cold sore, 10 days before I got some type of sinus infection, because of the full body stress that it goes through to have to heat your body back up, to have to adapt to that temperature and all of these things. The other thing that I don't do, my cold plunge, people are like, how cold is it? I don't go colder than 48 degrees. 48 is as cold as I can tolerate and feel good. Well, people are like, well, I go in at 33, 34, 35. Good for you.
You're nuts.
The colder it is, it's not the better it is.
Yeah.
You see people taking an axe and all these things to a lake or to the barrel they have in their backyard and getting in and saying, man, I'm hard. I'm doing hard things. I'm doing the right thing for my health. It's no different than intermittent fasting. People are pushing a 16 8-hour fasting window. So 16-hour fast. They're pushing themselves to like 2 or 3 in the afternoon when they have their first meal. And then they're eating the house, and then they can't stop eating, and they eat right up until they go to bed. And then they wake up and they're like, well, intermittent fasting worked for me for like the first 3 months, and now it's not working anymore. Well, what if we actually just shaped your eating window to be stop eating 3 hours before bed, like we talked about, start eating 3 hours after you wake up, and then you have a 7 to 8 hour window of sleep in the middle. You've automatically, without even trying, created a 14-hour fast without even trying. And now you're fueling yourself for when you need to be fueled, which is when you're awake, and you have the energy to do what you need to do, and it's sustainable.
And you're not
habits around that.
Yeah, you're not doing that binge cycle either. You're not doing that. Exactly. It's not really, it's intermittent binging more than intermittent fasting, I think. And I don't do intermittent fasting, but I eat first thing in the morning and all those things. But
and realize that it's another stressor on your body that it has to adapt to.
Yeah.
Everything is stress. Everything in our environment, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, doesn't know the difference.
And being able to identify those things in your daily life. And like, we're fortunate because our water comes out of the well at 51 degrees. So that's if we fill up our big tub, and we end up we don't have a dedicated cold plunge. We just have an 80-gallon bathtub that's in my wife's bathroom. So we fill that up with cold water to a point where, we can get the up to our chin basically and lay down in it. But yeah, I'm fortunate because that's as cold as I want to go. And that's as cold. That's where it comes out when we fill that up. But hey, this has been absolutely amazing. This has probably been one of my longest episodes, which is great. I always talk about how this is, these are as long as they need to be. And I mean, honestly, you and I could talk to you all day. I'm super interested in what you say. I did want to point out one thing that I think that you would think is funny. There's this thing going around on social media now where people are circling. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's like a picture of about 60 different products. And what they've done is they've circled the GMO part of these labels. And so they're saying how unhealthy we are now because the companies are putting GMOs in our food, right? So these foods are Oreos, ice cream, Skittles, snack crackers. Like literally there is not one food that any normal person should eat on a regular basis on this list. And I think that of anything that I've seen lately, that speaks more to our American mentality about nutrition than anything that I've seen, because just like it's back in the day, they used to they made organic Cheetos. I went to a cookout one time and this person brought organic Cheetos and I'm like, so you want to eat organic? Like, this is crap food. Like, if you want to eat it, great, but I don't know why you care about whether or not it's made organically. It's still crap. So anyway, I thought you would appreciate what's going around right now on social media.
Man, as you just started to list off everything there, I said, is any of this a surprise? It's like...
Yeah, it's the nutrition information that we have, and do some research on the conspiracy around some of the sugar studies that they did in the 50s and how they paid people off and all of this crazy stuff. So look, I love that you were here. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this out of your busy schedule. I'm going to do so many things. I'm going to go back because I edit these. So I'm going to go back and listen to this and really start to make some changes. And honestly, I really want to, I'll talk to you more offline about, getting some of this testing done for myself. Cause I think it'd be, and for Michelle, my wife, I think it'd be, very helppful and super interesting. So.
Awesome. Well, it was great, Kevin. I really appreciate you and look forward to more together.
Yeah. We'll see you soon when we get a little bit closer to the book release.
Sounds great.
All right.
If you're looking to really maximize your life and become the man you were made to be, head over to maxedoutman.com and get your journey started today.